Hi, so we've been taking a look at energy in ecosystems, and going along those lines, we're going to talk about energy in terms of processing food and nutrition. As you are aware, heterotrophs need to eat. They need to consume other organisms to get nutrients. Nutrients help to run the systems of the body, they make compounds for metabolic processes, and they help to grow and repair tissue. Nutrition is the process of taking in and using food. Malnutrition, mal meaning bad, is what happens when you don't have proper nutrition. It includes undernutrition, where an individual will suffer in terms of growth and in terms of their health. And then obesity is the other extreme of malnutrition, where too many nutrients are consumed and people become overweight, and there's health consequences associated with obesity as well. And that is a huge problem in the United States currently. Food processing. There are 4 main steps to food processing. The first is ingestion, which you can see this rabbit happily eating this piece of lettuce. This is ingestion. Digestion takes place in the digestive system, where the food is broken down mechanically and chemically. Once the food is broken down, absorption occurs, and those nutrients pass through the lining of the digestive tract and into the blood, and they get to the body's cells. And finally, there's egestion or elimination, and the food that is not digested is discharged from the body as waste. This is the human digestive system, and we will be taking a look at each part shortly. Digestion begins inside of the mouth. Mechanically, food is broken apart into smaller pieces by the teeth. Chemically, food begins to be digested in the mouth because our salivary ducts right here, our salivary glands, release saliva. And saliva actually contains a type of enzyme called salivary amylase, which actually begins to break apart carbohydrates chemically. The food that forms inside of your mouth in this rounded mass is called a bolus. Here are some mammalian teeth, and you can see the molars, the incisors, the canines. These are all used for chewing and getting your food into that bolus form so that it can be swallowed. Next, the food is going to move from the mouth into the pharynx and the esophagus. As food is swallowed, it is propelled through the pharynx and the esophagus via this wave-like contraction called peristalsis, and that allows the food to move through the digestive tract. So I want to show you an actual endoscopic video of peristalsis right here. Okay, and you can see a wave, a peristalsis wave happening. This is actually not in the esophagus, but instead it's in the stomach. And you can see that wave taking place here, where the food is then able to be moved along the digestive system. Okay, so after this point, the food can actually, and here we are right now, we started in the mouth, right? We went through the pharynx, and this is the esophagus. Next, the food is going to move into the stomach. Food is mechanically digested by vigorous churning, and the stomach releases gastric juices containing hydrochloric acid, or HCl, which is a strong acid, and the enzyme pepsin. It's in the stomach where the proteins begin to be enzymatically digested, and they're digested by that pepsin enzyme. The folds in the stomach can actually expand with food, so your belly can be distended to make room for the food. Your stomach can actually get to be about twice its size when it's filled with food. And the food hangs out for about 2 to 6 hours inside of your stomach. The food eventually forms into something known as chyme, which is a semi-liquid mixture. And this is the outcome of all that mechanical and chemical digestion that's occurring inside of the stomach. And you have a poor toddler who has a little belly ache. So we have started in the mouth, we've gone to the pharynx and the esophagus, and we've passed to the stomach. Where are we going to go next? Okay, here's a closer look at the stomach, and you can see these folds in the stomach that actually allow your stomach to be really stretchy and expand to accommodate the food that you're eating, even if it's Thanksgiving and you've eaten way more pumpkin pie than you should have. Okay, so the next place we're going to is the small intestine, which is actually the one of the most important parts of the digestive system. So chyme leaves the stomach through the pylorus and enters the section of small intestine known as the duodenum. This is the beginning of the small intestine, and this is like the most valuable player of the small intestine. Enzymes and hormones from the pancreas, liver, and gallbladder flow through ducts into this duodenum to help with digestion. So what do these organs actually release? And the liver, which we'll take a look at next, is super important. It produces something known as bile. And bile is very special because it has the ability to emulsify or break the fats apart into smaller pieces. They help with lipid digestion. The bile is stored in the gallbladder, so it's produced by the liver, but stored in the gallbladder, and then it gets emptied right into the duodenum. The pancreas releases an alkaline fluid. If you remember, the stomach is very acidic. And when we get to the small intestine, we don't want that acidic environment anymore. So the pancreas releases this alkaline fluid to neutralize that stomach acid. And the pancreas is very important because it releases many, many enzymes that help with the digestion of proteins, lipids, carbohydrates, DNA, and RNA. So here you can see the liver. This is the pancreas. Here's the gallbladder. So we talked about the liver producing bile, which helps break apart fat, and that bile is stored right here inside of the gallbladder. And you can see their proximity of these organs to the duodenum, which is the beginning of the small intestine. So in the small intestine is where most nutrient absorption occurs. So things are now broken down enough that they can be absorbed and used by cells inside of the body. The lining of the small intestine is ridged and folded to increase its surface area so that more absorption can occur. And the small intestine is lined with these things known as villi and microvilli, and I'll show you a picture of them right here. Okay, so here we have the small intestine, and you can see these are these villi right here, and you can see the microvilli. They're these tiny finger-like projections that increase surface area for absorption to occur so that you can get those nutrients to the parts of your body and the different cells in your body. So back to the small intestine. We already talked about the duodenum, and this is where simple sugars, amino acids, minerals like calcium and iron are absorbed and they're taken to the liver, often for storage. And after that point, the food is going to move from the duodenum into the jejunum, which here is in purple. And glucose is absorbed here. So are some of the other amino acids. Vitamin C is absorbed here, vitamin B, and some water. And these nutrients are distributed throughout the body by your circulatory system. And next, the food is going to move into the ileum, which is right here. And fat-soluble vitamins will be absorbed here, vitamin B12, fatty acids, cholesterol, which is a lipid, and some water is absorbed here. These nutrients are emptied into your blood vessels, and they are distributed throughout the body. Okay, so we have started up here in the mouth, we've moved to the pharynx, we've moved to the esophagus, we've entered the stomach, we went through the small intestine, that's all over here, and next we are going into the large intestine. The large intestine is where water absorption occurs, and water and salt are actually absorbed, and this helps to maintain your body's fluid balance because homeostasis is very important. And the large intestine also incubates or gives a home to bacteria that are very important, and they fulfill functions like help to produce vitamin K and certain B vitamins. E. coli also lives inside of the large intestine, but unless you have some kind of overgrowth of E. coli in response to a disease, it's usually not harmful. Now, waste are eventually, we took everything good out of your food, and all that good stuff, the nutrients were absorbed, and what's left needs to be released from the body. So the waste are going to pass through the large intestine, the water is going to get absorbed, and a few other things, and then we're going to move into the rectum and the anus, and the undigested food is going to pass out of your body in the form of feces. And if you remember, fiber is one of those things also that we don't digest that passes through the digestive system but allows it to function smoothly. Fun fact, feces are brown because of those bile pigments from the liver. So here's the human digestive system. Again, mouth, right? We went to the pharynx, the esophagus, we went to the stomach, small intestine, large intestine, rectum, and the anus. So what is left? We're going to take a close look at the digestion of each type of macromolecule that you learned in the biochemistry chapter. So first, we'll take a look at carbohydrates. If you remember, carbohydrates are all these things: bread, cereal, pasta, rice, we have donuts. These are rich in carbohydrates. Carbohydrate digestion begins in the mouth. You release something in your saliva known as salivary amylase, which is an enzyme. And this enzyme helps to break down these big, long chains, right, of carbohydrates known as polysaccharides. And they break those chains into smaller chains, like disaccharides, for example. Maltose is one example of a disaccharide, and smaller polysaccharides. So that's all going on inside of your mouth. The food is then going to pass into your stomach, and here salivary amylase is going to be deactivated, and you're not going to digest those carbohydrates any further until the food moves into your small intestine. And in the small intestine, your pancreas is going to release pancreatic amylase, which helps to break down undigested polysaccharides into maltose and other disaccharides. So you're going to end up with lots of these disaccharides over here. Now, the disaccharides are further broken down by maltase, sucrase, and lactase, which are all enzymes. Anything that's ASE at the end is a type of enzyme, and they're broken into monosaccharides, which is the smallest. It's the subunit. It's the monomer of carbohydrates. So at the end of this digestive journey, all the way to the small intestine, we're left with these lovely monosaccharides. And those monosaccharides are absorbed and taken to the liver. If you remember, dietary cellulose, which is fiber, which is a type of carbohydrate, can't be digested by humans, and it passes through our system undigested. Okay, you already got this image of carbohydrate digestion. It gives you a nice overview of how carbs are digested. The next macromolecule we're going to take a look at is the protein. Proteins are found inside of meats as well as other sources like lentils and tofu. If you remember, proteins are long chains of amino acids. So our goal in the digestion of proteins is to get down to these tiny little amino acid pieces. In the mouth, we don't digest proteins. No protein digestion occurs there. We digest carbs in the mouth, but not proteins. So protein digestion begins in the stomach with the enzyme pepsin, which helps to break proteins into short polypeptides, which are shorter protein chains. The food then moves, or the proteins then move into the small intestine, and you have these crazy pancreatic enzymes. You have a bunch of them. So trypsin and chymotrypsin break your polypeptides into smaller ones. And then carboxypeptidase, peptidases, and dipeptidases break polypeptides and peptides into individual amino acids. So we get to the goal, which is to make these amino acids in the small intestine. Okay, here is a nice overview of protein digestion, and I will include this picture for you so you can take a closer look. The last one is lipid digestion. In the mouth, we don't digest lipids. Mouth is for carbs. No lipid digestion in the stomach either, so that leaves us with the small intestine. And we already talked about these bile salts made by the liver. Well, they help break apart globs of fat into emulsified fat droplets, into smaller droplets, okay, with big surface area so they can be broken apart. And then this enzyme known as pancreatic lipase is going to break the fat droplets into fatty acids and glycerol. So if you remember what lipids were like, this is a triglyceride. You have a glycerol and 3 fatty acid chains. So during lipid digestion, you're going to break apart your lipid, your triglyceride, into the glycerol and the fatty acids. And here are some examples of lipids. Some yummy avocados. Here's some lard. We have oils. Butter is also a type of lipid. So here is a nice summary of macromolecule digestion and where each macromolecule is digested inside of the digestive system. Okay, here are some hormones that help to regulate digestion, and gastrin, for example, the source is the stomach, and it stimulates gastric glands to secrete pepsinogen, which is the inactive form of pepsin. And basically, what stimulates the release of this type of hormone, it's when your belly's distended, right, and your pants feel uncomfortable. That is actually going to trigger the release of gastrin. Okay, vitamins. Vitamins are organic compounds required in small amounts for many biochemical processes. Many of them are components of coenzymes, and we have fat-soluble and water-soluble vitamins. Our fat-soluble ones are A, D, E, and K, and the water-soluble ones are B and C vitamins. And here's this beautiful table with lots of vitamins, and I'm also going to give you a copy of this, and you can take a look at, let's say, vitamin K, which helps in the synthesis of blood clotting protein. So what happens if you don't get enough vitamin K? It takes you longer to be able to clot your blood. Minerals are also important. They are inorganic, not organic. They're inorganic nutrients, and they're ingested as salts dissolved in food and water. Trace elements are minerals required in amounts less than 100 milligrams per day. So you can look at these important minerals and their functions, and you're familiar with a lot of these. You know, you need calcium and magnesium and iron and zinc, as well as selenium and some other ones. So I hope that was helpful. This is a close look at the digestive system, which tells us what organisms do after they consume their food. How do they actually break it apart and absorb those nutrients so they can use them inside of their cells? I hope that was helpful.